Welcome to Sign for More Injury Funding, the podcast for all who want to learn about legal funding and its significance in the personal injury, workers' compensation, civil litigation, medical malpractice, and many other types of law practice domains. I'm your host, Laura, founder and CEO of More Injury Funding, the legal funding counselors with passion for law, medicine, legal funding, and heart for all suffering individuals. More Injury Funding is a sponsor, member, associate, board member, or business partner of this podcast, Georgia Trial Lawyers Association, Academy of Truck Accident Attorneys, Sandy Springs Bar Association, Georgia Association for Women Lawyers, or GAL, Georgia Association of Paralegals, Atlanta Legal Aid Society, State Bar of Georgia, St. Andrew Rowing Club, and Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. In today's episode, I have a special guest, attorney Shari Belitz, litigation strategist, owner, and CEO of Shari Belitz Communications, LLC, a litigation consulting company that teaches lawyers how to use social psychology to achieve favorable litigation outcomes, whether at settlement or trial. She's an attorney with over 20 years of experience in the legal profession. Prior to her litigation consulting career, Ms. Belitz was an insurance coverage attorney at the law firm and litigation manager in-house at AIG, where she handled complex mass tort lawsuits for Fortune 500 insured clients. During her legal career, Shari took a leap of faith and pursued a dream she had always had, which was studying forensic psychology, including advanced jury science and research at the graduate level. She speaks at various legal and insurance industry conferences, as well as universities and law schools, applying psychology to litigation, juror decision-making, and nuclear verdicts. Attorney Belitz is a co-author of the best-selling anthology at Network, the Cameron-inspired chapter book about online networking during a global pandemic and the power of female networks. Today, we'll dive deep into her EnPSYCHLAWpedia, and that is spelled differently, and that is EnPSYCHLAWpedia, the psychology methodology for litigation education, where you allow law students and attorneys study various psychological concepts and cognitive biases by breaking them into digestible forms and applying them to all facets of litigation and settlement process, including discovery, deposition, preparation, mediation, voir dire, opening arguments, direct examination, cross-examination, and summation. She also teaches juror decision-making as well as a phenomenon of nuclear verdicts. At the end of our episode, I'll have a fun pop question for Shari, so stay tuned in. Welcome to Sign for More Injury Funding, Shari.
Thanks so much for having me, Laura. Great to meet.
Absolutely. So tell us today a little bit about your defense background as a practicing attorney and what it entailed.
Sure. So I started out as a coverage attorney, civil defense side, working for insurance companies way back in the 1990s in Manhattan. And I had an interesting, fortuitous, maybe unfortunate situation where I was taking a summer's worth of depositions in the World Trade Center. This was summer of 2001, taking depositions on that 68th floor of the North Tower every day. And just by luck, by good fortune, by something, there was a witness cancellation and I wasn't there on September 11th. But afterwards, I had somewhat of an epiphany. I started questioning my career, my life, just did like really an audit of everything I was doing and realized I did not want to be practicing law in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I wanted to go back, as you said, I wanted to take a leap of faith and I wanted to study people. I wanted to study human behavior, decision-making, group dynamics, things that I was always fascinated with. So I made a little plan for myself, which was to go over to the insurance side. It was a natural fit after doing coverage work and to go back to school at night and to study forensic psychology, which is a legal psychology with my eye toward becoming a jury consultant or trial consultant.
And where are you located, Shari?
I'm in New York City.
Wonderful. And so do you help clients just in New York City or anywhere nationwide?
I wish I was helping some more clients in New York City. I seem to be all over the country, everywhere except New York City, though recently I've picked up a few cases in New York City, but I am all over the place. Just came back from California, was actually in Atlanta recently, and I go all over the country. New York is probably one of the states that I am in the least, unfortunately.
Hopefully soon you'll get to spend more time at home.
I'd rather take the subway than take a couple of planes. So yes.
So what led you to the idea of creating EnPSYCHLAWpedia, the psychology methodology for litigation education, and the set of online courses and related lessons that you came up with? Can you provide an overview of EnPSYCHLAWpedia and its significance in litigation education?
Sure. So let me just answer a couple of your questions there, because the way I started was really also EnPSYCHLAWpedia's birth, because that was, after I had made the leap of faith and went back to school at night for that psych law education. I then had my kids. I stayed where I was at AIG for a while until they were a little bit older. Then I took that second leap of faith and went to a trial consulting company. It took another world catastrophe. The first time it was 9/11. The second time it was the COVID-19 pandemic. And the COVID-19 pandemic hit. I lost my job at the trial consulting company, no severance, no nothing. I think I cried for a day, filed for unemployment the next day. And then the day after that, I gave a call to my friend who worked at the gym. He worked at this on the social media at the gym I went to. I figured he was probably not too busy and was maybe out of a job also. And I said, "Hey, Brian, do you know how to do a website?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's my jam." He's this young guy who was doing the social media for the gym. He knew how to do a website. And I said, "I have a bunch of ideas. I sketched them on index cards, and I want to start a company. And can you help me with the website?" So I hired him to do the website. I had all of these ideas about wanting to teach lawyers how to apply psychology to their litigation practices and to really up their game by being able to leverage or being able to mitigate some of these psychological phenomena. And I didn't really know how I was going to do it, but that was my mission. And I decided I wanted to maybe do it by video or somehow do it by teaching, do it by a subscription class. So I got out on LinkedIn and kind of fast and furious. And, it was the beginning of the pandemic. There were so many unknowns. Can you do virtual trials? What are the effects of masking witnesses? I had a million questions and I didn't have answers to them necessarily, but I knew the questions to raise to start interesting discussions. So I did that. I was doing that all day, basically. I didn't have a job and I got noticed. I ended up landing my first trial consulting job before I could even start my company. And it was sort of off to the races with this very traditional trial consulting company with everything online, but still a trial consulting company. So it wasn't until a little later that I was able to get back to that initial vision of, I want to teach lawyers. I want to make educational videos. I want to make it fun. I want to make it funny. I want to make it for lawyers who are new and who are intimidated by the courtroom and don't want to ask these questions. But I also want to make it for lawyers who are seasoned and maybe want to use the psychology to up-level their game. And so then I just went ahead. I met someone who was able to help me navigate these online platforms. Again, I'm like a Gen X total dinosaur. So I, partnered with my friend John Robinson, great guy, actually great guy in the personal injury world. You've probably seen him around on LinkedIn, and we partnered and we put this together. So I had my trial consulting company and this subscription course, and they both really were nice complements to each other.
That's wonderful. So how does psychology, one of the oldest sciences on this planet, allows attorneys achieve favorable litigation outcomes in their law practice?
So I think that's a really fascinating question, Laura. And what I like to think about is, so there's so much new. AI, big data, virtual platforms, like all of this stuff is the rage. And I'm learning it, and we should all be learning it, and we have to be learning it. However, you go back, and psychology is really one of the oldest social sciences. It's one of the oldest. Human behavior doesn't really change so much. And what I like doing is merging the old with the new. So, for example, and something I talk about a lot just in general, but I also talk about to my clients and I talk about in my reports and on LinkedIn, is the significance of themes, having compelling case themes to help your jury understand the cases. Themes are something that can be very old. I've taken themes from some very universal truisms that were just as applicable in 1300 as they are today. Themes about love and hate and jealousy and lust and betrayal and sibling rivalry and things like that. These themes do not, they do not age out. They age well. So you're taking some very old themes, some very old ideas and applying them to modern day business or modern day disputes. I recently had a case, pulled it apart. It looked very complicated. I had to diagram out the whole thing. And then once I did that, I looked at it and I said, you know what? This is actually really easy. This is a very simple business dispute. And here we have some of these universal topics, something that could have been relevant hundreds of years ago. So that's one of the more fascinating things about psychology, that something so old can be combined with AI and with big data and be so relevant today. And in fact, I'll just add one more thing because I just contributed to a book about AI and big data. And my chapter was how I use big data. I use statistics. I use quantitative research to tell stories to juries. I take that, and from that, I'm able to extrapolate themes and tell a very universal, understandable story to lay people who might not understand the actual technical, more difficult parts of a case. They're able to understand the general universal theme.
That's truly fascinating. And by the way, when is the book coming out? Or is it out already?
The book is out already. It's, I believe it's on Amazon pre-order. It's Legal Operations in the Age of AI and Data.
I love it. Excellent. So I'll make comments in the in the description of this episode, and so everybody who wants to buy a book, they'll have the link and resources where to find it. Excellent.
Fantastic.
So the relationship between psychology and the field of law is multifaceted and has evolved over time. Psychology plays a crucial role in understanding human behavior, cognition, and decision-making processes, which are all relevant to the legal system. What are some key aspects, Shari, of the relationship? I mean, are there any key aspects of this relationship?
So what's so fascinating, Laura, and you're bringing me back to when I started for my master's in forensic psychology, is I went there, I was a working person. I was a lawyer. I'd worked at a company. I really had my eye focused on trial consulting or jury consulting or litigation consulting, as we say sometimes. And I really wasn't thinking, okay, what else is there that really marries the intersection of law and psychology. But as I started to get to know my classmates and take some different classes, I found some really fascinating things out about the intersection of these two disciplines. So, for example, probably my closest friend in the program, she was an FBI profiler. So there you're merging a law enforcement and some psychology. So that was a law and psychology merger with what she was interested in. There was a hostage negotiator in one of my classes, also like a similar law enforcement type of background. There were people who were very interested in mental health and civil commitments and criminal commitments. So they were merging their law and psychology backgrounds in that way. And then, of course, there were several people I met who wanted to be jury consultants, or maybe had, maybe they were lawyers and went back like I did, or had some sort of communications degree, or, trial consultants have a lot of different backgrounds, which is interesting in and of itself. But those are some of the disciplines where you can really marry psychology and the law. There's so much you could do with both of them.
Mm-hmm. And how does your baby encyclopedia incorporate psychology into the study of law?
So, just like the name in psych law, I think sometimes I started the course, just because I love the name psych law, encyclopedia.
It definitely stands out.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I like rushed to get it trademarked and everything like that. I thought it was so cool. I like clever names, but again, clever names are often a part of trial work, whether we're talking about rhetoric or whether we're talking about themes, or, just writing like a really compelling cross-examination, whatever it is. Like it's I like to say it's wordplay all day. So I love words and the meanings of words, and I loved coming up with that name. But what it is I'll have a certain topic, like say the topic is direct examination, and I'll talk about it from the legal standpoint. I will talk about the psychology that goes into an effective cross-examination. Of course, you have to talk about the interplay with the witness, with the lawyer, the preparation of the witness, and really how psychology is tied into that. Sometimes my topic will be a little bit more general. Like I have a couple of recordings on charisma, attorney charisma, witness charisma, how that makes a difference, and how you can use that to become memorable, to become understandable, to assist in juror comprehension. Voir dire, jury selection, that's a huge topic. There is so much to cover there. Juror decision making. So I try to bring psychology into each and every aspect of trial work. And sometimes it's not trial work per se, it's pretrial work, like depositions, preparation, defending depositions, taking depositions, other discovery mechanisms. So I really just try to wrap psychology around everything that goes into a trial.
And Shari mentioned charisma, and that's something that always fascinates me. Is that something that can be learned, or is it God-given?
It can absolutely be learned. I mean, I think we all know those people who have that gift, who have that God-given gift, and it is a gift, but it can absolutely be learned. It's about the way you speak and the way you listen and the way you relate to people, and having a vision and being able to share that vision. It's a practice skill. I believe trial work is a practice skill. Public speaking is a practiced skill. Being able to do a phenomenal cross-examination or closing is a practice skill. These are all skills that can absolutely be learned. And I wouldn't say that about everything. I don't think being a brain surgeon is necessarily a skill that can be learned or practiced. I certainly could have all the practice in the world. I probably could never do that. But trial work absolutely is a practice skill. Charisma, absolutely, it is a learned skill.
I love it. What are some specific psychological concepts or theories that you explore through encyclopedia in the context of litigation?
So, what I talk about a lot in Encyclopedia, and it really informs every aspect of the litigation process, is something called cognitive biases. And we hear these terms a lot. Perhaps we're more familiar with confirmation bias or anchoring bias, exposure bias, some of the more popular ones. But there's actually hundreds of cognitive biases, which are mental shortcuts. They're heuristics. That's what we call them in psychology or in behavioral economics. And they basically, the whole idea behind behavioral economics, which is really what has brought us the cognitive bias. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Dan Kahneman, but that's sort of like the father of behavioral economics. And that is that human beings are irrational. We are irrational. The classical economic view was that people are rational and act in their best interest and try to maximize utility. So like it has some like undertones of philosophy, but the behavioral economics school is no, people do not act rationally. They take mental shortcuts. They engage in these cognitive biases, the anchoring, the availability bias, confirmation bias, affinity bias, exposure bias. There are so many of them. So what I do is I spend a lot of time explaining what they are, how they work, and how they can be held by a judge, jurors, lawyers, um, litigants, really anyone involved in the process. And what do we have control over? We have control over ourselves, the lawyers, perhaps the litigants to a certain extent. And we try to talk to the jurors to see who has these biases in jury selection or who might just have them generally because of the facts of the case, because of the paradigm of the case. And we can leverage them if they work in our favor, or we could mitigate them, or we could just choose to deselect jurors who we think are going to hold one of these biases that negatively affects our client, and we can make a decision to take them off our jury.
Very interesting and very complex. Um, how does encyclopedia contribute to a more comprehensive understanding of human behavior within the legal system?
So I think encyclopedia really simplifies, um, it really simplifies what goes on at a trial in a courtroom beyond the rules of evidence. Like when we're trying cases or when we're new lawyers, we know the rules of evidence. Maybe we know the court rules uh, front to back. We know the actual rules, but do we know what governs human behavior? Do we know what we're even looking for in an ideal juror or what a really poor juror in a certain case looks like? Often we don't. We don't even know the right questions to ask that are going to elicit that information. So, encyclopedia really brings that psychological piece to the more evidentiary legal piece and puts it all together to make sense, whether you're a new lawyer or whether you've been practicing for 30, 40 years.
So it doesn't matter the length of practice. It really doesn't.
Absolutely. I find there are some lawyers who have practiced a very long time and they just want to improve. They have a growth mindset. They want to do whatever they can, read whatever they can, learn whatever they can to be the best advocates for their clients, whether they're plaintiff side or defense side. It's all just about improving the craft.
Absolutely. Does encyclopedia address biases and prejudices that may impact legal decision making? How so?
Absolutely. So, encyclopedia, again, talks a lot about cognitive biases, and we go through some of the lesser known biases than, you hear about sort of in the mainstream, and talks about what they are, how to mitigate them, how to leverage them, and really like where we can find them and how we can become aware of our own biases and how our own biases are affecting a case or have the potential to affect a case.
And how can lawyers or law students benefit from incorporating encyclopedia into their education or practice?
So I look at it like it's very funny. When I started law school in, I guess it was 1995, I remember asking a friend's brother, who was like maybe the only person I knew in law school. I said, what can I read? What can I read before? This was maybe the summer before. What can I read to learn? And I think he gave me a book, Bramble Bush, or, one of the very typical books, maybe like 1L also. And it was like, okay, that was all there was. There wasn't LinkedIn. There wasn't really the internet, or at least I didn't use the internet at that point. There weren't articles, there weren't courses. Like now there is just this explosion of information. And if you want to learn, if you want to up level, if you want to understand, there is everything there for you at your fingertips. And encyclopedia is a resource that is one of those resources to help you understand how psychology can affect your litigation
That's
practice.
fascinating. In your opinion, Shari, what is the future outlook for encyclopedia and its impact on the legal profession?
So I think encyclopedia and courses like it, because there are many wonderful courses, how to develop business and just some of the more practical skills that we don't necessarily learn in law school. So I think the future of a course like encyclopedia is to really democratize the information, to make anyone who wants to go out and seek it and go out and learn, to really understand and become better at what they're doing. Because before that, I remember starting law school, not only was there not a lot of information out there, but people who came to law school with maybe siblings or parents who were lawyers or who had been to law school, they just seemed to have so much more information. I was friends with someone and he would say, yeah, like my dad would talk about negligence at the dinner table. And I was just kind of suffering through, okay, what are the elements of negligence? And I don't understand proximate cause. But something like encyclopedia and something like all of these other courses that there are out there really makes it just as easy if you're a first generation law student, lawyer, than if you've had a family of 100 years of lawyers. So it really seeks to just make that to democratize it, to make the information available to all.
And this is so great. I hope this episode about encyclopedia, the psychology methodology for litigation education, was informative and educational for everybody. As promised, here's a fun pop-up question for you, Shari, today. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. If you were hosting a dinner party and could invite any 3 fictional characters, who would you choose and why?
Okay, so fictional, that's interesting. Okay, I'm going to say the first fictional characters that come to mind, I don't know if you're familiar with them, the characters in Fortnite. It's a video game my son is obsessed with. He will not ever get off this video game. I just have to see what it's all about. So I'm inviting the Fortnite characters to dinner. Second would be my favorite fictional character growing up, also cartoon character Fred Flintstone. I loved the Flintstones. I thought he actually reminded me of my dad. I just thought it was a fantastic show. It was so was smart and funny and well done. And I've seen every episode. And third would be probably my favorite fictional character from a book, and I'm so happy that my daughter loved this book, was Harriet the Spy, which was one of my favorite books. And Harriet was she was such a badass for her time, and being a kid and just kind of snooping around and observing. And Harriet was a great people watcher, and I find I have a love of observing people and watching people. So Harriet, Fred Flintstone, and the cast of Fortnite, whoever they are. Those are my dinner guests.
I absolutely love it. Can I join your group?
You can absolutely join my group. You could I'll sit you near Harriet. She's the coolest.
Please, I'll bring the wine, okay?
Again, that sounds like a good deal.
Sure. Again, that was an amazing time spent with you today. And if anybody needs your professional help and is looking for your litigation strategy advice, how can they reach you? Do you have website, social media, resources, email, phone number?
So you can always reach me on LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn, Shari Belitz, and just send me a DM. I'll get back to you same day. Or you can email me, Shari@sharibelitz.com. And my website's sharibelitz.com. So it's all just about throwing my name into Google and you'll find me somehow.
I absolutely love it. That was Shari Belitz, litigation strategist, owner and CEO of Shari Belitz Communications LLC, a litigation consulting company that teaches lawyers how to use social psychology to achieve favorable litigation outcomes, whether at settlement or trial. I want to thank you all for listening and watching our episode today. For more tips and tricks on legal funding and personal injury related topics, follow me, download, like, and subscribe. It's time for more injury funding podcast on several podcast platforms, including but not limited to Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, and others worldwide. And follow more injury funding on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, Google Business Profile, and my website at www.moreinjuryfunding.com. I can't wait to see and hear you again soon. Until then, be well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Laura.